On today's episode of the Milk Making Minutes, I'm excited to play my conversation with Desi, a mom of a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old who had different breastfeeding experiences. She attributes those differences to birthing in a better hospital because she had better insurance and therefore better access to care the first time around. You will hear a story that reminds us that more support leads to better breastfeeding outcomes. As you listen, think about the people who supported you on your breastfeeding journey. If you're still pregnant, think about who you need to add to your breastfeeding support team. Let's dive in. Hi, Desi. Welcome to the Milk Making Minutes. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Yeah, so as we get started, introduce yourself and your family. Tell us what you think we need to know about you.
I'm Desi, and I live in central Massachusetts, but I'm originally from California. Mom to two girls, 12 and 8. And yeah, just living our life now. We homeschool. I'm a dog trainer.
So, as before we dig in, what was your exposure to breastfeeding, baby feeding before you were having kids of your own?
My mom breastfed all of us. I think except my brother who's closest in age to me, I think she obviously wanted to, but he was, like, having none of it, so
Mm.
he ended up at some point and I forget, I should go back and talk to her and ask her about her experience. I never, did a lot of that. I'd ask her about, like, her raising me, but never about my brothers.
Mm.
But my youngest brothers, I remember them breastfeeding late too. I don't wanna say late, but longer. So I didn't have very many friends to bounce things off of. So a lot of stuff that was really big when I had Mila was blogs. People were There was
Mm.
so
Mhm.
many blogs with beautiful images and, like, people talking about home births and breastfeeding and, like, raising your kids in a more, like, natural way, and I was, like, really intrigued by all that, so I think that was my exposure too while I was pregnant. I was really
Mm.
tapped into that mindset.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, so as you were looking at those blogs, did you set any goals for yourself? Did you have an idea?
I Yeah, I definitely was, determined to breastfeed. That was really important to me, and then from there, it was however long I could, sustain it or however long the kids wanted. I was really like that was my goal was just to be really fluid with it and not get too attached in case it didn't work out for either reason or to let them go as long as they needed. And I don't think I had that goal. Like I never told myself I'm going to breastfeed as long as the kids want, but it just happened. It occurred that
Mhm.
way and I just
Mm.
knew that this is I can do this right now, and this is what they need me for, and here I am. So it just folded into that. But I think, yeah, being open was a goal.
Okay. Okay. And when you were researching breastfeeding or looking at breastfeeding, did you know that people fed their babies for longer periods than that 1 year mark? I guess you said your mom did.
Yeah, my mom did. And then, yeah, I know that a lot of people would talk about, I guess, what I would see. Maybe it was before, it could have been when I was pregnant, or it could have been while I was breastfeeding, or it could have been even after and just knowing. I would hear people talking about feeling judgment and things like
Mm.
that. So I knew that people did it.
Mhm.
I just know that, and I also knew that some people felt like there was a more of a timeline and that you stop at a certain time. I knew that those were differing opinions
Yeah. Okay.
out there, or different experience. I never had anybody. I think maybe I had one person made a comment like, "You still breastfeed?" But I never really felt like anybody. Maybe I just didn't notice. Maybe I was
Yeah.
oblivious.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I asked Desi to describe her birth experience with her older daughter Mila, who she planned to deliver in a birth center. She labored for over a day and a half and was finally able to deliver her vaginally after being transferred to the hospital and receiving an epidural. Here's what happened right after this long and difficult labor.
She was given right to me,
Okay. So she's
and I think I fed her within the first, like, few minutes of her coming
okay.
out, and like I said, it was just really she just naturally latched on.
Okay.
It was really simple.
Was that first latch initiated by you or was that initiated by her? Do you remember?
She was on my chest, and we were just, like, watching her and cuddling, and then she started rooting around, and my
Mm,
doula told me, "I think she's ready." So then
mm,
everybody coached me into how to feed her and, that this is in everybody noticed.
mhm. That she was ready. She was rooting around and ready.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long was that initial time of just you and her and snuggling and feeding before baby was taken for any?
Gave us a pretty good amount of time. Yeah, I felt like we'd had her, and then I don't remember exactly, like I said, Jeff would know more than I would.
Mhm.
Um,
But it felt like a
and
long time to you.
it felt like a good amount of time. Yeah, I
Okay.
got to cuddle with her and really get to know her, and then they took her right next to me. They had the little scale and,
Mhm.
um, did their exam,
Mhm.
and she was a heavier baby, so she had to have little blood tests every couple hours. I think they were
Mm.
checking
Her
something. I
blood
think
sugar.
yeah, her blood sugar.
Mhm.
So they would take her and prick her little heel, and then they bring her
Mhm.
back. But yeah, it was a nice experience
Okay.
at
Okay.
the
So
end
then
once she came out.
once you came out, yeah.
Yeah.
So in those initial latches, did you experience any pain? Were you seeing anything in her mouth when she was latching? Were you noticing milk gather in her mouth? Were you seeing any swallows?
I'd see little swallows. I remember that's what the doula was watching her a little, like, under her, throat for,
Uh-huh.
like, while we were feeding, and she's, "See, she's drinking and she's doing good." So they were just pointing out things and noticing. I don't remember I was just, like, in
La La Land. Yeah.
love and La La Land and on
Yeah.
probably on drugs and just
Uh-huh.
tired. But yeah, no, I definitely remember my doula was pointing out things. I remember her being there and, like, really, like I said, coaching me through it.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Okay. And then were there any lactation supporters at the hospital that came to check in, see how things were going, offer any educational support about milk supply? Did that happen at all?
Yeah, I don't think it was anybody in particular, but the nurses were coming in and they were definitely, like, on top of it. And it was nice. It
Okay.
was a nice it was a nice hospital. I should have stayed with that program.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. They were nurses, but not necessarily lactation.
Not anybody. I think they
Um,
had the offer of, if we have a lactation consultant if you want, but the nurses, they watched, and I felt really comfortable with
with what
Mila.
was
She
happening. Desi then described the birth of her second daughter, who is now 8. This experience was totally different. She made it to the hospital in just enough time to push. There was concern for both the baby and for Desi, and their heart rates were being monitored closely. Her husband still has lingering memories about these scary moments that he will occasionally talk about. She did not even have time for the epidural she was expecting. This is how Desi described the immediate postpartum moments with her second baby.
I got the skin to skin time with her. They were definitely monitoring her afterwards a little bit more than I remember
Uh-huh.
with Mila. I remember with Mila it was like more, the room was still dimly lit, it was really cozy, but with Emily it was like everything had happened, and it was now they were gonna settle it down, and then eventually they got everything cleaned up, and Emily's in my arms, and they took her and they gave her time. But yeah, it was just a different hospital, different vibe.
And why is it that you had chosen a different hospital?
Oh, insurance reasons.
Oh,
We had Kaiser for Mila because I had a good job before.
uh-huh.
And then I decided to stay home, and then my insurance changed, and I ended up getting we went to the local hospital, which was a little more outdated, and Yeah, it was just, like, funkier. Like, the Kaiser, they had this nice birthing suite, it was beautiful. They had just remodeled and
Right.
yeah, so it
Right.
was just a different vibe.
Yeah, for sure. No, that has an impact. That definitely impacts the type of support you get.
Yeah, yeah.
And people feel that. And people, there's like a privilege continuum. And
Oh, totally. It is sad. Yeah, 'cause I was working, so it's like I could have gone back to work and had that job and that insurance and gotten pregnant with him, but then I would have to not I wouldn't be able to stay home with the kids, and
right,
I had to make a sacrifice
right,
in, my future children's healthcare, basically.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, but
So, yeah, so interesting the choices we have to make. And sometimes it's not a choice. The things that people have to do to just get by and provide the care they need for their kids.
totally, like, right? Like, 'cause that's all that's available. It's not fair.
Right.
I had a really hard time nursing Emily, which is so funny that Mila's birth was so hard. And she was just
Mm.
like a breeze, and then Emily, I knew what I was doing. I breastfed Mila for
Yeah.
so long. I had to call and find somebody, go somewhere after I'd already been discharged because it wasn't available at this other place.
Wow. So tell me, at what point was the initial latch okay? Like those first moments, did you think, okay, this is good? How long did it take before you realized, yeah, I need some help?
Yeah, I finally reached out for help after, like I said, after we'd already been discharged and gone home, but I was struggling in the hospital, but I didn't have a doula the second time. That was
Hmm.
a big deal, and
How did you know you were struggling in the
'cause it
hospital?
hurt. It
Okay.
hurt really bad.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really painful, and then after a few days, and then I went home and my nipples were just ripped to shreds. It was
Mm.
so painful, and I couldn't get her to latch good, and then she wasn't, eating enough, and then my breasts were just engorged. It was so painful.
Mm.
So, yeah, that's finally when but I don't remember there being I didn't have my doula there in the hospital, like, coaching me through things, 'cause I had done
The
it, so I felt
the
confident
great
that I could,
yeah.
and then I
Well, the
didn't have
great
the
thing in
nurses.
that situation is that you had experienced one really good breastfeeding situation. So you knew it wasn't supposed to be like that. So
Yeah,
you
so
knew to reach out for support. Whereas when that's your first experience,
I didn't have to suffer for right?
you
Like, months and
right,
months and
you
months, and then
don't have
someone finally
anything
tell me, like, "No, that's not normal."
you don't have anything to compare it to because there's so much conflicting information out there when people say it could hurt for a little while. There is some discomfort in the beginning. You don't know what discomfort means, especially when, uh, as a society, we are used to ignoring our pain cues.
Oh, especially as women, you have to "I can do this."
Right, right.
Or "I should be able to do this." You get a lot of shoulds.
And
So
especially
I
when
knew
we
that
would,
it didn't have to be that way,
yeah.
so I felt good.
We would do anything for our children, of course, and so if you're like, "If this is what I have to do to feed my baby," then
Right?
let's do
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But you had this first experience, you knew it wasn't like this the first time around, which was so helpful to know.
Yeah.
Um, so how did you go about finding somebody to call?
So I did call my doula from the first birth, and she wasn't working anymore because she had gone on and had all her babies,
Mm,
and she was, busy at the time, but she had a lactation consultant to refer me to,
okay.
and she was based out of the hospital, north of us. It wasn't the same hospital that I had Mila at, but she was there and she was available and she took my insurance and she was great. She really helped me figure out how to hold Emily different ways, how to like really get my nipple into her mouth and train her how to eat. Whereas like Milo was just like hungry enough.
Mhm. Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like she really walked me through things and then it was much less painful, even though my nipples were destroyed. She could nurse and I could heal at the same time.
Okay.
And then we were fine. And then
Yeah.
we nursed for the rest of that time. No
Oh, good.
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you get nipple damage, but you correct the latch, then typically the nipples can heal because the damage is not continuing to happen.
Yeah, and I guess just the way it goes in her mouth differently
Mhm.
was making
Right.
such a big deal that it was like, okay, you can still use this even though it's healing, but it will heal. Whereas before it was like, you can't use this at all. It's not going to
Right.
work for
Right.
anybody until you
Yeah.
fix that latch.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason we call it breastfeeding because it's the breast tissue that's being compressed to have the milk come out through the nipple. The baby should not be using the nipple to get the milk
Yeah,
out.
she had all nipple. She was like, "Rah, rah,
Yeah,
rah,
exactly.
rah."
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now this is going to be different for every baby and every what we call a dyad, every mother and baby together, because the shape of the breast tissue, the shape of the baby's mouth, it's going to vary from pair to pair. But what were some of the positions that really helped you to be able to hold her in ways that were comfortable for you and allowed her to be able to nurse in a way that was better for both of you?
So probably having I forget what I know that they all have different names, the holds, but using
Yeah.
that first of all, using like a breastfeeding pillow was
Okay.
massively helpful because it would
Mhm.
help support her body and I could keep my posture was part of it
Mhm.
too,
Mhm.
how I was sitting. So instead of hunching over and trying to hold her in a cradle, I was able to place her on the pillow and
Mhm.
have that support there for her body. And then I think it was, yeah, just the cradle. So her body coming across my body and then nursing, or the other one where you hold them under your arm and they're on the outside of your body.
Mhm.
That was really a good one for her. And I remember
Mhm.
Milo was just, I was always cradling her. She was just like whoop, whoop. And I would just switch her back and forth. Where Emily, like I had to, uh, in the beginning at least, just hold her a different way.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that outside hold, head going between your arm or body going between your arms.
Like the football hold, like
Yeah, she's on the
yeah,
outside. Yeah, like a little
yeah,
yeah,
mhm,
foot like
yeah,
a little football.
yeah, yeah. So once you were able to find ways where she could better position herself to get more breast tissue in her mouth, then the pain went away and she
Yeah.
was getting more milk. I started the Milk Making Minutes because I'm passionate about supporting breastfeeding people. But more importantly, I knew that hearing real people tell real stories would benefit both the storytellers and the listeners. I had this idea for 3 years before I launched. I asked so many people how I should begin, and Anchor came up repeatedly as the easiest way to launch a podcast. And I have not been disappointed. If you are passionate about a topic and have wanted to start a podcast, you can use Anchor to record and distribute your podcast. It's easy to use. You can use the editing tools right from the platform. You can distribute your podcast episodes seamlessly to listening platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts right from Anchor. And the best part is, it's free. And the tech support has been great too. Go to anchor.fm or download the app right to your phone to get started on your great podcast idea. Was there ever any weight loss with her because she wasn't transferring milk? Had you even gone to a pediatrician before you reached out to that IBCLC for the weight loss?
Yeah, she had gone I think she'd gone for her, like, very first checkup before that, and then at the pediatrician, who I did talk to about latch, and she did talk a little bit, but she did recommend finding or reaching out to a lactation consultant, but this was at a
Mhm.
health, center, so I she didn't recommend anybody that they had in that at that health center. So that's why I
Mhm.
reached out to my doula. I was like, "Oh, I know someone who knows people, I'm sure." Yeah.
So this was within the first week?
Yeah, so she did not lose any weight. She
Okay.
was fine. I was in pain. Had
Yes.
we gone longer, probably she could have lost weight. She wouldn't have been getting as much as she could have.
Mhm.
But yeah, nobody
Yeah.
had any concerns about her. They were both big babies.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that got resolved. Was it more than one visit that it took with the IBCLC, or it was just that one visit and then things were better?
Just that one visit was all I needed, and yeah, just the because I knew what to do before. I knew that it didn't have to be that way.
Mm.
I just needed to some coaching,
Mhm.
really, and I think it was probably just the lack of that I had initially with Mila. Like, I had people that were just, like, right on top of it. Like I said, they just swooped in or, "Okay, so let's, like, look out for these signs," and I didn't have that with Emily.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. And did your insurance fully cover those visits, or did was it partial coverage for that visit? Do you remember?
Full coverage. I don't remember ever having to pay anything.
Okay. Okay. So then how was the time after that immediate postpartum time with both kids? That there's that immediate time when you get home, you're you're learning how to navigate it. You said you breastfed on demand with both of them, and you mentioned Mila being a tough infant.
Yeah, yeah. Mila was more she'd have a harder time sleeping.
Mhm.
She would probably, need to be held a lot more, and maybe it was just out of availability and necessity. I didn't have, I and I wasn't so, like, responsive, uh,
Mhm.
maybe with Emily because I had a preschooler by the time Emily was born, so she just rolled with it maybe more.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it coulda just been all the things, like me being younger and not knowing, and I hadn't had a kid, and none of my friends had kids, so I didn't
Mm.
have sort of anything to fall back on with Mila,
Mm.
so but yeah, she cried a lot more and, had a harder time sleeping.
I know you said you didn't have other people around that you really knew. Did you feel supported? Did you feel like you were getting the help you needed to navigate breastfeeding in and all the time that takes?
Oh,
Eh,
yeah, I definitely had a lot of support in just respect from my husband. He knew that, he
mhm,
can't he couldn't do that, and that it was necessary, and so he was really good about making sure I was fed and watered,
mhm. Yeah,
making sure that I
very
was taking
important.
care of myself healthily so that I wouldn't probably to protect himself too because I get hangry, but,
Mm, mhm.
I had that support and just his, I guess I would say his devotion to me.
Yeah, the
But
emotional
yes, I had
support.
him, and then my
Yeah.
mom and his mom were both constantly sometimes they would share things that I didn't need to know, but I knew that I had them to be like, "Hey, this is
Uh-huh.
uncomfortable," or "I'm leaking," or all those things. Like my mom, she worked in the pharmacy, at Kaiser, and she would bring me all the over the counter things I could possibly need or want, which was really nice. And,
Mm.
uh, now that I'm thinking about it, I appreciate it so much more
Yeah, like what kind of
than I
things?
remember. So, like, those nipple, like, leaking pad things,
Mm,
and then I
mhm.
forget what that ointment stuff is called, but she would
Like
get
the
that.
Lanolin? Yeah.
Yeah, and she would get me, of course, like, uh, what are those?
Gel pads or something?
Yes. Yeah, cooling
Mhm.
things,
Mhm.
all the things that they probably had, she would come over with. Some of them I probably never used and
Yeah.
had just under my sink, but I do remember because I had that, when I had a friend who was having problems, "Oh my god, I have a thing, let me go grab it," and was
Ah,
able to go digging through my reserves of cool things that my mom got me that I ended up not needing or so, yeah, I had that kind of support too, which was
okay.
nice to not have to be like, "Is there a thing for this?" And she's like, "There is a lot of things for this."
Oh, cool. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned that with Emmy, it was like a healthcare center that you were going to for healthcare. Did they know anything about breastfeeding? Were they providing you any informational support? Were you asking for it?
I think I mentioned it to her. She was a nurse practitioner, and she would see Emmy and she would see me, and I mentioned it to her, and she was supportive and educational, and then I was like I just, like, had a light bulb go off in my head when I was talking to her, and it was just like, "I remember my doula exists, and she knows everybody." So I was like, "I'm just gonna call her," and that's what I did.
Mm,
So they probably had more services than I knew about or was exposed to. I just remembered that I had access to somebody who was probably more tapped in,
yeah.
to what I was looking for than maybe that they could give me. If I just followed that path, I might not have, been as happy as if Sarah had told me because I trusted her. I liked that whole thing.
Okay.
Like, I had a relationship with her, and whatever she told me, I was like, "That is what I want."
Yeah, and then as the years went on, once you went past that year mark, did you get any pressure from the healthcare providers to stop breastfeeding, or
No,
were
no.
they supportive?
Yeah,
Okay.
they were all, no, I never felt like they were judgmental. They never said pro or con either way. They knew. My doctors knew if they were asking, "Are you breastfeeding?" And I'm sitting there with a toddler and I say, "Yes." We never had
Right.
conversations about
Okay.
anything. Like, nobody said good or bad.
Desi's children continued to breastfeed well into the toddler years while also eating table foods, and their care providers were always supportive and never showed any signs of concern about this. I then asked Desi about her experience with pumping, and she talked about buying a Medela breast pump out of pocket during her maternity leave while pregnant with her first, and making the decision to stay home. So, when you had Mila, you had a job that you worked full time at that you planned on returning to after a maternity leave. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have her, and then how long into your maternity leave did you realize, oh, no, I'm not going back?
Almost immediately. Like, I remember for 4 weeks, I was dreading calling them and telling them, like, "Look, I changed my mind." They
Yeah.
really wanted me to come back, and I didn't want to, and I didn't have to. I'm really lucky and privileged, and we made it work.
Hmm.
But, yeah, it was really quick into it. I was like, "This is silly. I can't leave this baby."
Yeah.
Um,
And so you decided it was better for you to be home with your baby. Okay. And so the pump you got from Target, was that an electric pump or like a manual pump?
it was electric, a little
Oh,
Medela,
okay.
I think it
Okay.
was
And that was
called.
something, yeah, Medela. And that was something that you just bought out of pocket.
Yeah, we were
Okay.
just like I was like, My boobs are full and they hurt, and I think that this might help."
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you didn't really do anything with that milk. You would just relieve the discomfort and
Yeah.
save a little in case grandma was around or something, but it wasn't.
Yeah, because it came right? It came with some bags, and yeah, I just put it in there and then put it in the freezer and then grandma she lived behind us, we shared a property, so she was right there, so there were times when she would try to bottle feed Emily, that they weren't used to it. It was
Yeah.
so they were like, "Bleh. What is this?
Right. Right.
Silicone
Yeah.
nipple, get this out of here."
I know. Yeah. Yeah, I've known people whose babies just never would take the bottle, and even people who worked full time and their their babies just would make up for lost time when they were with their parents. And it's tiring for the baby feeding person, the breastfeeding person, because that means a lot of breastfeeding throughout the night. But it is
Yeah.
possible. It is
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, everybody figures out what works
Right.
for them, right? Yeah, and
Right.
sometimes the
Yeah.
kids are very opinionated.
Yes. Yeah.
They know what
Yeah.
they want.
Many times, as we near the end of an interview, I ask guests to share their worst and best breastfeeding experiences. Desi's worst experience will make even the most experienced mom cringe. Here's what she had to say.
I was flying with the kids. Jeff was already out here in Massachusetts, and I was coming out to be with him. This is our first time that we ever came out here. So I had to fly with the kids by myself, and I was sitting next to I had Mila, and then Emily was in my lap, and then we had this, like, businessman next to us,
Oh no.
which was like he's probably traveling for, like, a meeting or something, like, he's got things to do, but it's like this single rider guy sitting next to us, and Emily was freaking out at the landing. It was I don't know, something was happening, it was taking a longer time, and we ended up stuck for a bit, and so I was nursing her, and this guy, I could tell he was so uncomfortable. He was, like, not he didn't even like that he had to sit next to us. I get it.
Right.
I might
Sort
not
of.
wanna sit
I
next to
mean,
us either, but here we are, and then so I'm nursing her to keep her quiet so that she doesn't, uh, bug anybody because 'cause we're all miserable, and she's doing a great job, and then she finishes up and she's sleeping, and she was a barfer. Not just spit up, I'm talking like, barf,
oh
like, so bad,
no.
and she barfed all down the front of me. I'm pretty sure she got some barf on the guy next to me. It was the most mortifying, but you just had to sit there because 'cause you're stuck on a tarmac on an airplane. I'm, like, covered in baby barf. It was a red-eye flight. Oh, it was the
Oh
whole thing was just, like,
no.
the worst experience I'd ever had with breastfeeding, and I will remember it for the rest of my
Oh
life.
no.
He was nice, though. He didn't yell at me or say anything. He just sat there in the smell and
Smell
oh
of the
my
baby barf.
god.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
How old was she?
she was probably 6 months old.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Oh
so it was
my
like she had
gosh.
taken in a lot of milk too, so
Right.
she was
Yeah.
already putting it away at that point. So
Oh my
what
gosh.
goes in all comes out. So
Oh man. Oh, that's
that
a
was
good
it.
one.
Yeah.
Okay, and what about best experience or advice? Either one.
Yeah, I guess the best advice was just and not so much the spoken advice from my mom, but just the letting them lead, the baby led
Mm,
weaning, right? Like that
mhm,
was we didn't talk about it, she didn't push it, she didn't and it was never anything that she said I should consider or anything like that. It was just like she'd shown me as a child, this is how she did it, and I knew it was a thing, I guess.
mm,
So that
mhm,
was that. Like, I'm really happy that I was able to sustain for that long because they both needed it, and when they were done and we didn't have any I know a lot of people can have weaning experiences that are hard for mom
mm,
and baby, and we didn't have to do that. So I was
mm.
that was probably the best advice for my mom, and not because she told me to,
Yeah,
or even because I decided that's what I was gonna do, it just happened.
yeah, that's great. I love that. Awesome, Desi. Thank you so much. These stories are so great. I love getting to walk down memory lane with you and hearing your experiences, both the differences in hearing a first story that, like, oh, it went amazingly as far as breastfeeding goes, and then a second story that was more challenging. Because I think a lot of people do think, oh, yeah, I did it once. So the second time's going to be easy. And to
It'll be the
hear,
same. Yeah, they're not the
right.
same.
It's not the same. Every baby is different, and you
Yeah.
just don't know what's going to happen. But then, just as interesting as hearing the differences in where you birth and what their support is like, and how that can impact a person. Because it does matter. Having access to support matters on a person's experience.
Totally, and I had different access, and I'd already had an experience, so, like,
Mhm.
I could have been supported more in the second one, so,
Yeah.
yeah, this was fun, I had fun, I knew it was gonna be interesting to recall all this, so
Yeah.
what a sweet way to start my day.
I know. Great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So to recap, what we've learned from Desi today is that 1, every baby is different and each breastfeeding experience is different. And sometimes our second can be harder than our first. 2, where you give birth matters. Choosing a place to birth that values breastfeeding support and has hospital policies that are aligned with positive breastfeeding outcomes are more likely to set you up for success. And 3, you can set yourself up for success by gathering supporters in advance. Whether that's taking an independent breastfeeding class, hiring a doula, or having a lactation professional that you've already spoken with and have built a rapport with so that you can call them when you need support in those early postpartum days can make all the difference. Thanks for listening to the Milk Making Minutes. Please rate and review on your favorite app and join the Milk Making Minutes Facebook group for bonus clips and to keep the conversation going.